Today, we're jumping straight into a narrative that it's less about grand strategy and more about what happens when a calculated risk goes horribly, horribly wrong.
It really is.
We're looking at sources that detail a global event that didn't start with bombs or invasions. It started with a silent war.
A war waged with biotechnology. It was meant to be economic sabotage, but it spiraled into this unthinkable global mutation.
And that's our deep dive today. We're looking at a total collapse that was rooted really in financial and geopolitical arrogance.
Exactly. Our sources paint a pretty grim picture of a civilization that essentially engineered its own end, not with a big flashy war, but with, trade wars and the race for economic dominance.
So our mission is pretty clear. We need to unpack how this cold, calculated act of economic warfare.
Using these engineered viruses?
Right. How that set the stage for what the sources call the Age of Monsters. And then trace the path of the only figure who is predicted to offer any kind of salvation.
The legendary Satrio Piningit.
To get there, though, we first have to understand just how the world ended.
And to do that, you have to recognize how precarious everything was. The sources describe the global environment right before the crisis as a matchbox ready to ignite.
That's a perfect phrase for it. It wasn't peace.
Not at all. It was highly organized suspicion.
We're seeing world leaders locked in this desperate fight for dominance. The whole era was defined by mounting tensions, fragmentation, these intense trade wars that were just dissolving the global order.
And what really sped it all up was the pivot to non-conventional conflict.
Right.
The sources are really explicit here. In this final stage of competition, economic sanctions became the new weapon. It was a Cold War fought with tariffs and resource controls.
It just choked off all the international trust.
Yeah.
Paranoia wasn't just, a side effect. It became policy.
I mean, it's chilling to think about. A doctrine where crippling your opponent financially is better than fighting them on a battlefield.
And you see the result.
Yeah.
Old alliances just evaporated.
And the new ones were so fragile, based purely on what can I get out of this right now?
The stakes couldn't have been higher for them. They were fighting for economic stability, for national security, for the future itself.
And the tragedy is that everyone is so focused on winning that economic war, they didn't see the much, much bigger risk they were unleashing on the entire system.
Which brings us to Pandora's box, the engineered silent attack.
It didn't start with a bang. It was quiet.
So quiet. It starts with a rumor, then a leak, and then the official story comes out.
An eventual laboratory accident.
Of course.
What's genuinely horrifying about the material is how it describes the bioweapon's original design. It was, and this is a quote, engineered to cripple, not kill.
It wasn't a weapon of mass destruction in the traditional sense.
Not at all. It wasn't for killing troops or wiping out population.
No, it was pure financial sabotage. The sources say its explicit target was the rival nation's food supplies.
Think about that. A surgical strike against a competitor's GDP. You bring them to their knees without firing a single shot. It's a silent attack.
The strategic coldness there it's staggering. You destabilize their food, you starve their economy, you force a surrender. And all while having plausible deniability about, direct human deaths.
But that's where it all goes wrong. The defining moment, the turning point, was the failure of containment. The mutation. The source materials is clear that this agent, which was only supposed to attack livestock or crops, quote, leaped from livestock to humans.
And right there, that calculated economic move turns into something far worse.
It's a total systemic failure. The unintended biological consequences just completely eclipse the original political goal.
And that economic war instantly becomes a biological nightmare for everyone, equally.
And the speed is just shocking. The virus spread like wildfire.
Yeah.
It was invisible, unstoppable.
Carried on the wind, in the water, through a simple touch. I mean, how do you defend against that?
You can't. There's no early warning system for an enemy that moves like the air itself. And the transformation process, I think that's the most visceral part of these sources. The infected, they didn't just die.
Not at first.
No, not at first. They changed. The virus didn't just kill cells, it rewrote them. It just consumed whatever was left of their sense of self.
And their humanity was just overridden, replaced by rage, hunger, and this insatiable need to spread the infection.
The enemy wasn't some outside force anymore. It was your neighbor, your family, twisted into a monster.
Which means immediate, catastrophic societal breakdown.
Right. Cities, these great symbols of civilization, They just became slaughter fields.
And there's a certain irony there.
Yeah.
These nations that were just bitter economic rivals now share this terrifying common enemy that makes all that fighting seem so pointless.
The old map just doesn't matter anymore.
So when you look at the aftermath, the speed of the collapse is what's so striking. The entire global infrastructure.
Yeah.
It just failed.
Almost instantly. Communication networks, power grids, supply chains.
All of it. It was a domino effect. One system falls, they all fall.
And that leads to the really tragic part, which is the futility of conventional power. The sources say trained armies were helpless against the hordes.
I mean, what good is a tank division or air superiority?
Exactly. When it's a biological struggle, a soldier's training is useless if one touch means you become the enemy.
And that's the core tragedy, isn't it? All that investment in defense tech made irrelevant by a microscopic agent.
Humanity was thrown back centuries, just scavenging the leftovers, trying to survive the next hour. The age of monsters had begun.
And the sources, they give these really vivid, haunting details of this new world. You have to picture it. Dust everywhere.
A perpetual twilight. The sun is just a faint orange disk.
And the air itself is heavy, thick with the smell of decay.
A constant reminder of the failure, the sheer scale of the death.
And the landscape. I mean, buildings that were once these monuments to achievement are now just jagged teeth on the horizon.
Twisted iron, bent concrete. The world became a graveyard.
But it's in this absolute ruin that the narrative pivots. Amid all that chaos, there's this one solitary belief that persists.
Which brings us to the prophecy and the survivor.
Right. The sources introduce these multi-generational predictions of a predestined champion, a pejuang yang ditakdirkan.
Someone who would rise up to lead humanity out of the darkness. This figure is known as Satrio Piningit.
And for you listening, that name has real weight.
It does. Satrio Piningit comes from deep regional and spiritual traditions, often Javanese folklore. It means something like a hidden knight or a messianic figure.
So someone who stays concealed until the moment of greatest chaos.
Exactly. And then they emerge to restore justice and order, the ultimate anti-chaos figure.
So this prophecy isn't just a myth. It becomes this critical psychological tool. It gives survivors something real to hope for when the world makes no sense.
It's a narrative anchor.
Yeah.
Precisely. And the reality of this hero is such a contrast to the grand myth. The sources go from this huge scale of global failure right down to a single young man.
Described as almost like a boy, just stepping through the debris.
And his survival, in the beginning, it's all instinctive survival. He doesn't have any powers. He's just smart. Learning how to find food, get clean water, build shelter from scraps.
He sees the whole spectrum of humanity's response to this.
The absolute worst of it, the desperation, the violence born of fear. But the sources are clear. He also saw a glimmer of hope.
Little acts of kindness.
Selfless acts, yeah. And that's what kept him from just tipping into total despair.
You have to wonder what kept him going. The sources say the memories of the old world were like sweet torture.
A painful reminder of what was lost.
But also the fuel he needed to be resilient. He wasn't just driven by instinct, he was driven by the memory of what normal felt like.
But to become the figure from the prophecy, he had to be more than just a survivor.
He needed preparation, the training, the crucible.
And it was comprehensive. Mental, physical, spiritual. It had to be, for a destiny that required him to fight for the soul of humanity, not just for territory.
And the training itself is almost mythic. This isn't just boot camp.
No. The sources talk about the extreme nature of it. He had to face his deepest fears and fight what the material calls mythical beasts in the heart of the jungle.
Which you have to wonder, are those literal? Or are they the worst of the mutants? Or maybe psychological tests?
The goal was the same, either way, to grow his courage with every single challenge he overcame. It's the classic hero's journey, just set in a biological apocalypse.
He wasn't just learning how to fight. He was learning to command himself. His fear.
And the result of that brutal training was transformative. He became stronger, faster. He went from a survivor to a commander, a warrior.
And the sources emphasize he gained a spiritual strength that went beyond conventional military power.
And this isn't just about faith. It's about this internal resolve that makes him immune to the despair that crushed the old world's armies. He had a real reason to fight.
And that transition from training to leadership is the real dawn of hope in the story.
He completes his transformation, he emerges, and he starts finding these pockets of other survivors who are on the verge of desperation.
They're physically broken, but their will to live just needs a leader.
And this is where Satrio Piningit stops being a myth and starts being a force multiplier. He doesn't just offer protection, he offers a story. A reason.
He gathers them and reminds them what they're fighting for. Hope.
It's a powerful image. The sources describe the light shining in his eyes against this dark, ruined skyline.
And he offers something tangible, too. A path forward. He promises food and safety, the two rarest things in the age of monsters. He gives them a social contract.
And maybe the greatest symbol of humanity's refusal to just give up are the children born in this ruined world.
Their laughter persists among the debris.
A constant counterpoint to all the decay. They are the future he's fighting for.
So we've mapped this incredible journey from the cold geopolitical tension of an economic war through the catastrophic betrayal of this engineered virus, and finally to the rise of this new kind of warrior that humanity needed just to survive.
The core of the tragedy, and I think the deepest insight here, is the failure of calculation. The most destructive war imaginable wasn't conventional. It was a spontaneous, mutated outgrowth of a weapon designed only for economic harm.
The ultimate devastation came from a calculated design just failing to stay in its box.
Exactly.
And that leaves us with a final provocative thought for you to consider. If the greatest danger to global civilization came from a bioweapon engineered not to kill, but only to cripple a market, what does that imply about the inherent instability of using advanced science for conflict? When we focus only on the immediate goal, economic victory, do we blind ourselves to the scale of destruction an unforeseen mutation can unleash? It makes you wonder if every act of weaponized science carries a silent, catastrophic wildcard.